This is Human Trafficking by Kate Writing. This is a picture of human trafficking victims being saved by the FBI found on their website. Informal economy is a part of the economy that is not monitored or taxed by the government and not necessarily illegal. The gray market is a legal way of trade to buy and sell goods, just unofficial and unmonitored. The shadow economy is an underground economy that includes illegal activities and or illegal goods with unreported income. Illicit goods are illegal, tangible, and intangible goods. The black market is an illegal and unofficial way to trade, buy, and sell goods. It's very bad. The dark side of globalization is the negative part of globalization that allows for drug and human trafficking, organized crime, and money laundering. Human trafficking is part of the dark side of globalization. It happens all over the world, and all of the transactions happen through the black market. Human trafficking is modern-day slavery, and many people do not want to acknowledge it. Because people do not want to talk about it, victims of human trafficking have a harder time being rescued. There's one way of classifying human trafficking into the gray market or the shadow economy. Prostitution is one form of human trafficking, and in places where prostitution is legal, it may be considered part of the gray market, and as a result, part of the informal economy as well. Illicit goods are also sold on the black market. These goods include human and drug trafficking, money laundering, etc. The GDP of the black market is hard to estimate, but it is possible. According to the Federal Bank Reserve of St. Louis, the black market is responsible for 36% of the GDP in developing nations and 13% of developed nations. It is estimated that 36% of people 18 and older in the U.S. work informally. Of these people, 56% also said they were formally employed, and another 20% also worked multiple jobs. In 2019, the United States lost somewhere between $47.5 and $115.3 billion in gross domestic product to piracy. Counterfeit products are projected to make $524 to $959 billion by 2022, costing the United States $1.7 to $4.5 trillion. Human trafficking is a crime dealing with people of all demographics. Men, women, and children can all be victims. Any person under the age of 18 participating in commercial sex acts is a victim of sex trafficking. Human trafficking can take place in a wide range of contexts that are hard to find. The biggest challenge is the lack of reliable data relating to the scale of human trafficking. Human trafficking is an issue dating back to the beginning of time. It began as a way to increase power. Many people would be stolen from their home and either sold as manual or sexual labor. The first possible record of human trafficking can be found in the Bible. The many wars mentioned in the book usually resulted in taking the enemy captive and selling them as slaves. Human trafficking was also found in Egyptian and Roman empires because they were built on the backs of slaves. It was then carried to modern countries. The United Nations defines human trafficking as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by improper means such as force, abduction, fraud, or coercion for an improper purpose, including forced labor or sexual exploitation. That is from End Slavery Now. It's estimated that 24.9 million victims of human trafficking were exploited for labor and 15.4 million exploited for forced marriage. That is roughly 40.3 million people, or 5.4 victims for every 1,000 people in the world. This image was found on Stop the Traffic. It shows 40 outlines of people, and each of those people represent 1 million victims. So you can see how large this human trafficking problem has grown. This is another image called child sex trafficking. Human trafficking is the illegal trade of human beings for the purpose of sexual exploitation or forced labor. In the first 48 hours alone on the streets, 1 in 3 children are lured into prostitution. The average age of entry for boys and girls is 11 to 14. 25% of victims that are trafficked are from South and East Europe, and 90% of victims trafficked in Europe usually end up in the sex industry. Only 1 to 2% of trafficking victims are ever rescued, and only 1 in 100,000 traffickers are ever convicted. Human trafficking earns about $150 billion a year, $99 billion from commercial sexual exploitation, $34 billion in construction, manufacturing, mining, and utilities, $9 billion in agriculture, including forestry and fishing. Middlemen can make $4,000 to $50,000 per victim, and victims are sold repeatedly for $90. I chose human trafficking because it is a major issue in the world today. Not many people want to talk about the issue, and that is not okay. Many political parties speak about human rights, and trafficking is a direct threat and violation of human rights. It takes away a person's right to their own body. When someone is taken from their home and forced to work, mine, fish, or commit sexual acts against their will, that is a crime that cannot be repaid through prison time or community service. Human trafficking is not only a violation of human rights, it is a violation of everything that is good in this world. Many people might say that without slaves, kingdoms and empires would not rise to power, and advances in technology, science, and math would not be discovered. But those discoveries do not justify the millions of people who had no control over their lives. Yes, slavery had to happen to continue history, but human trafficking, also known as modern-day slavery, has no place in the current world. Under no circumstances should a person be forced to do something against their own will. Religious texts mention human trafficking as slavery long before Mesopotamia, but modern human trafficking most likely began in ancient Mesopotamia. The hearth of human trafficking in recent history has been the United States. Human trafficking is contagious diffusion, which is affecting nearly all individuals and areas outward from the source region, spreading like a disease. The idea of human trafficking spread everywhere early on in history. It also spread because of trade. Human trafficking markets popped up and more people bought humans. And as more people bought humans, more people started selling them as well. Human trafficking is a global issue. Many countries participate in human trafficking, both producing and consuming. Due to the secrecy of human trafficking, it is impossible to know the true scale. It is mostly consumed in developed countries and mostly produced in lesser developed countries where people are desperate for money. This is a map showing the amount of people both produced and consumed in the world today. As we see in the United States, it is dark blue, meaning a very high number of people are consumed, and Russia and Southern and Eastern Europe, Europe and Asia have a very high number of people that get stolen. The economic impact on a global scale. Corrupt politicians rely on human trafficking industry, specifically sex trafficking. Money brought in from buying and selling humans benefit those who are participating. Corrupt individuals who wish to commit sex crimes without getting convicted travel to a different country where governments turn a blind eye due to the income it brings. Forced labor and indentured servants do not get paid, which means lower overhead costs for manual labor, and it takes jobs away from the general public, leading to fewer jobs available. For the local economy, a part of the country's tourism industry, those who come to participate in sex trafficking need hotels, bars, restaurants, etc. Mostly benefits the black market and the human trafficking economy. People brought in are used to Money brought in is used to bribe leaders of certain countries to raise or lower prices of certain materials such as oil, wood, or weapons. I'm unable to provide statistics because everything is hidden and impossible to figure out due to the unknown size of the human trafficking circle. This is a picture of women in debt bondage, another form of human trafficking. Found on Wikipedia, I was unable to find the original source of the image. A positive human impact. People who procure, transport, and sell the victims are impacted positively. Profits are so enormous that the predators also get rich quick. Those who use the victims benefit because they are getting cheap labor or satisfying their disgusting sexual desires. People who are impacted negatively are the victims because their lives can be permanently ruined. Families, villages, towns, or cities where victims are stolen from because they lose their daughter, sister, friend, cousin, son, etc. Job markets because the cheap or free labor takes jobs. And the impact that counterfeit has on people. The impact in lesser developed countries because the real product is expensive and sometimes hard to import. So people can make money off of counterfeit goods. They can make the counterfeit, sell them for high prices without paying the import fees, making a higher profit. And most customers won't know the difference between the real and the counterfeit. The real goods coming into the country impacts them negatively, and eventually the customers will see the differences between the real and fake products and get mad, and the owner then has to shut down. In developed countries, people can replicate the product, lower the quality, and therefore the price is lowered, and underwhere people buy, and the producers make money. The producers can also be sued for making fake goods and selling them, and the original person makes a lot of money, and the counterfeiter gets shut down. When a state has a lower gross domestic product, it has a lower gross national income. The possibility of your kids having food and surviving is tempting even if you know they will get abused. The more developed a state is, the higher likelihood of being consumers instead of being producers. The sex trafficking brings in wealth through the tourism industry, and the more money brought in equals the more developed a state can become. One of the reasons it is so hard to fight human trafficking is because wealthy, powerful people are involved. Colonialism is a major part. Human states that were taken over now struggle turning human trafficking to support the economy. Mercantilism, or the theory that trade generates wealth, is a large part of human trafficking. The trade is one of the most expensive and lucrative businesses in the world, and human trafficking brings in a lot of money. Human trafficking is not a consumer service, which is why it is so profitable. Drugs are consumer services, so they can only be sold once, while sex trafficking victims can be sold many times. However, human trafficking can be classified under the tertiary sector of the economy. The tertiary sector are things that can be used again, such as hotels, hair salons, and restaurants. The difference between the tertiary sector and consumer services is being raped once versus being sexually abused for the rest of your life. People can also buy human trafficking victims in market areas. Market areas include other countries where the governments turn a blind eye, the Super Bowl, LA, Washington, D.C., and my old high school. Human trafficking victims are also part of the gig economy. Each time they are hired, it is a gig. Victims do not know when they will be hired, and so it is very unstable. Human trafficking also has a very well-defined supply chain. Traffickers in villages might steal or buy a person, sell it to the middleman, and then victims are transported and sold again. The pimps then buy the victims and hire them out repetitively. Human trafficking is biodiverse in the places victims are taken from. Developed and less developed countries, jungle villages, and big cities, rural towns, etc., are all places that people can be trafficked from. Traffickers are also diverse. Parents, crooked men, very rich and influential people can all be traffickers. A girl at my old high school was hired out as a sex slave by her parents almost every day until the cops found out about it and found her a new home. In the United States, the security makes it hard to sneak people in and out of the country, so traffickers have a comparative advantage when they steal people in the United States and sell them in the U.S. It is cheaper to buy people in less developed countries, but more expensive to falsify identification and get into the country. Traffickers could steal people in the United States and leave the country to go to countries where white people are more desirable. Traffickers can also take victims to rundown parts of the city first, then to town. As people move to bad parts and start the gentrification of that town, traffickers move out instead of being caught. Places of mixed-use development are ideal for traffickers. The close proximity to hotels makes it easier to sell them, and the victims can be sold then taken to a hotel or place of entertainment. Many human trafficking cases take place in the middle of a large city. With some big cities in the central business district, large business owners can take a break and seek some form of entertainment, aka taking advantage of sex trafficking victims. We know through past crimes on human trafficking that CEOs and other administration officers take advantage of human trafficking victims. In one case, 57-year-old chief executive at advertising for Backpage.com, Carl Ferrer, was arrested on human trafficking charges. He and others were arrested on April 12, 2018. Ferrer pleaded guilty for human trafficking. He then took a plea deal and testified against the founders of Backpage, Michael Lacey and James Larkin. Others involved are Scott Spear, Johnny Jed Brunst, Daniel Heyer, Andrew Padilla, and Jayla Joy Vaught. Together, they had 93 charges, including pimping and money laundering. This is a picture of Carl Ferrer being brought into the courtroom by Melissa Phillip. As a consumer of digital media, I've benefited from piracy. One of my favorite franchises, Barbie, has released 36 cartoon musicals from 2001 to 2017. I have seen 24 of these movies, first watching them in my childhood on VHS tapes and CDs. Last year, I was feeling very nostalgic and wanted to watch those 24 movies again. I was able to find 14 movies via piracy websites and YouTube playlists. I know it is wrong to pirate movies, but I no longer have a CD or VHS player, so my only option was to pirate them. Plus, I was able to find them on my phone, meaning I was able to finish my chores and watch them at the same time. This was extremely convenient, and my mom was happy I was able to find them, albeit annoyed when I sang the songs with my earbuds in. As for counterfeiting, we purchased a knockoff game called Secret Hitler. Though it was a blatant copy of the original game, it was completely legal as the original game had never been copyrighted, though it was of a lower quality. My perspective on the black market has not changed very much. I already knew that very bad things went on in the black market. I just didn't realize the extent of what was happening. The black market is an intense, well-planned, highly connected economy of its own. It is hard to get into it and even harder to escape. It is a place for criminals, and as time progresses, the black market will grow fast enough that the FBI and other government agencies will not be able to keep up. As it is right now, government officials are unable to arrest everyone involved with the black market. But every time someone is arrested, it sends a message to everyone involved. No matter how hard you try to run, we will always find you. The black market is a sketchy place that most people do not want to deal with. It is also very competitive. The informal economy is not necessarily illegal in small quantities. The bigger it gets, the more money the government loses, making it hard for communities to get the money it needs for schools, parks, roads, etc. The black market contributes to the informal economy, so ultimately the black market hurts communities. In terms of economic geography, many people are hurt through the black market, and both the black market and the informal economy make the white market and the global economy suffer to the extents that are hard to reverse. Thus, sometimes behind the scenes, the black market can help the economy through blackmail and conspiracy. I liked the project. It was enjoyable. I like all the different ways we had to find information. I like Slide 9 and how you gave us the choice to choose which economic geography topics to connect to human trafficking. The only way I could have improved was to pick a better topic. Turns out human trafficking pictures and maps are very hard to find on a censored school computer. This is page 1 of my bibliography, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Thank you.